with media, but you saw the light, Bev. Good on you. Beverley East.
Thank you very much, Tim. Wonderful to be here today. What a stunning day it is outside, so let's hope we get to enjoy a bit. Thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. Let me just say it's slightly overwhelming from up here. Rob was right, the view from here looks like a large room. Great to see everyone. Can I acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, their continuing connection to these lands and waters on which we meet, work and play. Can I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge my fellow Lilac, colleague here today, Mining Club President Natalie Taylor, also to all Life members for the work you've done to establish this amazing organisation. Thanks to sponsors, Grounded Group. Butchies are my favourite. I knew there is a reason that we're working with Grounded to build our Albemarle Paris Grove accommodation precinct in Australind. Wonderful work and glad to be working with you, Paul. Evol LNG, an organisation I know a bit about from my background and history, and TLT Turbo. Wonderful to have your support. Tim, thank you for that quick but generous introduction. I've been given strict instructions from Cassandra to talk about myself a little bit before I dive into the company bit. This makes me deeply uncomfortable, but if anyone knows Cassandra, you know that you do as you are told. So here we go. As noted a bit by Tim, I've done a couple of things in my life. You could say a couple of careers. I started in the media and spent most of my time at the ABC. I wasn't crash hot at journalism, if I'm honest, so I then thought, well, through a very short stint in the union movement, and yes, in the union movement, and I'm very proud of that time, I just don't talk about it a lot. I then went to work in government for several different state government ministers. And then I discovered the joy of the resources sector and had the opportunity to join Woodside in 2005 and ended up staying there for nearly a decade. I stepped away for a little while to lead a not-for-profit organisation, but I found after about 4 years, I really missed the cut and thrust of being in the resources sector. You know, for all of us in the room, we probably don't value it enough while we're actually in the sector. Because it's just, you know, going to work every day. But one of the things I came to learn when you're outside of it is that resources attracts the brightest minds and some incredible and very innovative people. And I just love the energy of being in the middle of all of that complexity, that cleverness and that innovation and that desire to really find a solution to challenges. And then let's face it, every day there's at least a challenge, so it's always exciting. I came home to Perth last year to take up a role in sort of a manufacturing and a kind of mining company, which is how someone described it to me. And it's been really interesting for me as a person who's mostly spent my life working in oil and gas. I often now walk into a room and it's full of people I don't know, which is really strange in Perth. So if I walk into an energy industry room, I'd pretty much know half the room or more after a decade in it. So I'm treating today as a little bit of immersion therapy. And the idea is that this represents for me a very fast way to make 400 new friends in mining. So I'm hoping the speech goes well and we can all consider ourselves friends at the end. Let's talk work. I'm conscious that Albemarle is an organisation that people are talking a little bit about just at the moment. And it's also our first appearance at the Mining Club. So I really do want to take a bit of time to properly introduce you to the organisation and tell you just a little bit about the fascinating kind of organisation that it's been and how it's evolved from a very different roots to become the company that it is today. It seems to have been a company that has managed to pick the moment, to be, as you might call it, in the right place at the right time. And I think this is where we feel we find ourselves right now. I also did just a little bit of research into the Mining Club, and I discovered that you formed about 50 years ago, and it got me wondering just a little bit, about what was the mining landscape back in those pretty colourful days, I suspect, of the 1970s. And this is where we get to test to see if the clicker does indeed work and if the presentation goes up. Okay, there we go. Oh, I'm going to go back. All right, there we go. So let's have a little look at the resources or the mining sector in the 1970s. At about this time, I was a kid living on farms in Wongan Hills and Dandaragan, and I was pretty confident that the economic prosperity of Western Australia rested solely on the sheep's back, as the saying goes. But it turns out, according to this book that we found called The Great State, it was published back in about 1970. It describes Australia, of course, as the lucky country, but it also talks about Western Australia as being the luckiest state, because the state has great natural resources, which it noted back then were largely untapped. As you can see on the screen, we've reproduced a chart of the mineral production at the time, with the total output for that year being at $633 million, and more than half of that, not surprisingly, was from iron ore. Gold production at that stage was worth about $12 million, while ilmenite, coal, manganese, tin and copper, according to the book, were making important contributions to the state's economy. Petroleum at 9% doesn't give us even a hint of the LNG boom that was to come here in WA, and of course, as you'd expect, not a mention of lithium. In those days, the Greenbushes mine was on its journey from being a tin mine, which began its operations in 1888, to a tantalum mine, and while it was well known to contain lithium, there was no market and it ended up in the tailings. A fun fact that I found out recently is that the Greenbushes mining lease, apparently it's M102, is possibly the first and certainly the oldest continuously mined lease in Western Australia. Now, if that's wrong, I reckon there's about 30 people who are going to come up afterwards and tell me so I look forward to having a chitty chat about that. Now, another fun fact while we're at it, because I'd hate you to go away without having learnt something kind of useless except for quiz nights. Last year, Taliesin, the operator of the Greenbushes mine, began retreating the historic tailings piles, and today those tailings are producing a grade that is at least as high as some existing mines today, which is pretty interesting when you think about it. Okay, let's fast forward in many ways. We're going to head forward 50 years. According to a WA government publication from earlier this year, the Mineral and Petroleum's Review, the resources sector in Western Australia is now worth a staggering $246 billion, more than 380 times the value of 50 years ago. Sales of lithium or spodumene concentrate are worth $16.3 billion, which makes it the fourth most significant commodity produced here in Western Australia at the moment. Many of you in the room will also be aware that it represents about 54% of global supply of lithium at present. Now, about the same time that the tin mine began at Greenbushes 135 years ago, on the other side of the world, in the US state of Virginia, the Albemarle Paper Manufacturing Company was formed, and within a few years, this paper company was selling more blotting paper than any operation in the world. It wasn't until the 1960s that Albemarle first moved into chemicals, and it chose to borrow $200 million to buy a very large chemicals company known as Ethel Corporation, which was reputed to be 18 times as big as the Albemarle Paper Company. It's a very famous story internally, and it gets talked about quite often. The company saw the opportunity to enlarge and diversify their business with Ethel. It's pretty bold when you think about it. It was a move which, according to the New York Times article, startled financial circles and actually saw the company, this tiny little paper company, in negotiations with giants such as Standard Oil and the General Motors Company in order to get the prize. Purchasing Ethel was a real milestone moment in the history of Albemarle, and it took the company down the path to chemicals specialty. And that's what's really sowed the seeds for the capability that we leverage today to underpin our global strategy to be a leading lithium producer and converter. You could say that it's in the 1960s that chemicals specialty really started to become part of the company's DNA. Fast forward now to 2015, and now you know a little bit of the backstory to Albemarle. Perhaps you won't be greatly surprised to discover that suddenly this large specialties chemical company with products such as brominated flame retardants and drilling mud for the oil and gas industry, suddenly, out of the blue, makes a move into lithium with the purchase of a $6 billion acquisition of a company called Rockwood Holdings. Rockwood Holdings held some fantastic lithium brine operations in Chile, in Nevada in the US, and a very handy little 49% stake in a mine in the southwest of Western Australia called Greenbushes. So in 2015, when we bought Rockwood Holdings, the bulk of lithium demand was really split between ceramics and glass use and other industrial type applications. Less than a third of it was used for batteries. If you reflect on that, a pretty solid business rationale back in 2015 now looks like a pretty prescient move by the company. Okay, we're going to fast forward again to 2023. Lithium demand, as we know, is being driven by the increased uptake of electric vehicles, or EVs as they're known, and the world is desperate to transition to cleaner fuels for transportation. I think it's worth noting that Albemarle's internal analytics show that there is increasing demand within consumer electronics market and also the grid storage sectors, but truly, it's EVs that are the standout in terms of driving demand. They are going to account for over 80% of the growth in demand for lithium by 2033. And this momentum is even reflected here in Australia, where historically our uptake of electric vehicles has been, let's just say, somewhat slow compared to other nations. Did you know there were more EVs sold in the first half of this year than in all of last year? And they now represent an absolutely startling 8% of all new cars sold here in Australia. But the trend is clearly on, and I don't know if anyone's noticed, you can find a BYD, a Build Your Dreams, or a Tesla in your suburb somewhere on any given day. Now, this is the tricky part of the speech, folks, because you hear a lot of opinions and a lot of views about lithium demand. If you read the papers or you listen to Tim and watch the telly, everyone has a view about lithium demand. Lots of people have a view about future battery technologies, and of course, there's a lot of conversation at the moment about future pricing for lithium. I'm not going to get into any of those details, let me tell you. But I do want to talk a little bit to the fundamentals, because I think they're really worth keeping in mind as you see the daily colourful digest in the media. There's kind of a reason that I did 10 years in the media and then got out, because it's, you know, there's a lot on a daily basis, and sometimes you've got to look through it all a little bit. So let's talk about the facts. Today, a lithium-ion battery pack for an EV contains about 8 kilograms of lithium. Consider then the International Energy Agency data showing that more than 10 million electric cars were sold worldwide in 2022, and that the IEA's net zero roadmap says the world is going to need about 2 billion EVs on the road to hit net zero by 2050. So, if you multiply that 8 by 2 billion, that gives you about 16 million tonnes at an average grade of 1.2% lithium. James Shea, this is your job. You did this math for me. If this math turns out to be wrong, can everyone just come and see James Shea, please, at table number 7? Anyway, so basically 8 by 2 to 16 million tonnes, average grade 1.2% of lithium. That means we need producers to find and then mine about 1 billion tonnes of raw ore to meet future demand. 1 billion tonnes of raw ore. There are also constant stories, if you, depending on what media or social media that you tap into, about new battery technologies. Only last week, Monash Uni produced a media statement about producing a smaller, lighter lithium sulfate battery, which they say will require less lithium and it will need no nickel or cobalt. And of course, most of you have probably tapped into some of the discussion about sodium-ion batteries and what role they might be able to play going forward. I think we all understand that sodium-ion batteries are a fascinating idea, and it is a real idea. But all the experts I speak to tell me that they think it's unlikely to be the technology of choice for passenger vehicles going forward. So therefore, Albemarle's view, and Albemarle is confident, that EVs will always require lithium batteries of some form, and that the urgent need to transition to clean energy creates sufficient demand, and there is room for multiple technologies and approaches for the foreseeable future. So yes, I think we all anticipate continued volatility in what are complex and often very opaque markets. Certainly they are being impacted by geopolitics, domestic industry policies, and of course technology. The growth curve may slow at certain times, but it is never going to reverse course. Medium and long-term demand will be greater than supply, and that bodes very well for Western Australia and of course very well for Albemarle and other lithium producers. So here we are today, October 2023, and as we all know in this room, WA and lithium seem to be words that go hand in hand on almost a daily basis. As I've said, Albemarle had already moved to take a strategic stake in hard rock resources in Western Australia. This is a picture of the beautiful Greenbushes mine. Rockwood in 2015 delivered us 49% of the Greenbushes mine, and the mine has a current production capacity of 1.34 million tonnes per annum, and there's currently a third chemical grade processing plant under construction, so expansion of this mine is happening as we speak. Then in 2019, Albemarle invested in another historic mine with Wodgina in the Pilbara, where today we hold a 50% interest and it's operated by our JV partner, Mineral Resources. Wodgina has a production capacity of 750,000 tonnes per annum, and of course, it also has expansion plans aplenty. Now, I think the room is probably acutely aware, and if it wasn't, Tim certainly helped make it so, thank you, Tim, that Albemarle has taken a keen interest in this state as a significant part of our strategic growth strategy. Largely because, as you would know, the quality and the scale of the resources discovered here and emerging here are tremendous. Our bid for Liontown attests to our interest in continuing to secure quality resources where we can, but we will always need to take a disciplined approach to capital allocation as we look at opportunities available to us across the globe. I would note that, as our CEO Kent Masters said during his recent visit, we have actually taken quite a portfolio approach to resources, including recently taking positions in exploration activity. We recently purchased Western Lithium, for example. We also are taking a global view. Consider the MOU we have signed with Patriot Battery Metals for partnership in James Bay in Quebec. But let's talk a little bit about conversion, just for a change. Conversion, in case some have not had the opportunity to hear about it before, that's the manufacturing process that takes the spodumene concentrate that comes from the mines and converts it into lithium hydroxide in the case of the Kemerton facility, or lithium carbonate at some of our international facilities, particularly in China. Again, I think Albemarle made a very early call that WA was the right place for us to invest in value adding with downstream infrastructure. For better or for worse, and it seriously depends the day you ask me whether it's for better or for worse, Albemarle became the signature tenant at the Kemerton Industrial Estate, and we officially began construction of 2 processing trains in March 2019. And my comrade David Parker there was at the turning of the sod in March 2019, weren't you, David? A big moment. So the first processing train is now operating, and we have the qualification process underway. And the second train is well into commissioning phase, which does take a couple of years. In May, you may remember that we gave the go-ahead for the construction of 2 more processing trains in order to meet what is incredible global demand. When the expansion at Kemerton is complete, Albemarle's spend on downstream conversion in WA will be well over 4 billion Australian. Kemerton will have the largest single-site conversion capacity of any plant in the world at 100,000 metric tonnes per annum. For a time, Kemerton is also going to represent the most advanced manufacturing technology in the world. Although, I have to be honest, conversion technology is advancing rapidly with a small number of companies that hold the process know-how, so we will get overtaken in due course. But just for this moment in time, it'll be the biggest and it'll be the most advanced, and it's in our backyards, which is pretty exciting. You know, it's not that well understood that very few companies in the world currently know how to produce lithium carbonates and lithium hydroxides. And I think Albemarle's advantage in this area stems from the deep chemical DNA that I mentioned earlier, but also importantly, and not often spoken of, the knowledge and the learnings that we've gained from the conversion assets that we've held and operated in China now for a number of years. This history has allowed us to develop an advanced manufacturing hub in the southwest of the state, where a 4-train processing site will employ more than 800 locals to operate it. It will develop new skills in the region, support local businesses, and create incredible investment in that southwest community. We have done at Kemerton exactly what the federal and state governments have been calling for in their critical minerals policies: investment in downstream capability, making Australia beyond being just a mine. But in a way, it is a bit of a unique set of circumstances that has made us the right company for this undertaking. So in a way, it's putting together the 2015 acquisition of the Greenbushes share, adding to it the decision to build that nearby downstream processing at Kemerton, and then coupling that with the know-how, the ability to do that chemical processing with the technology that we were able to bring from our history and also from our China operations. Let me just switch a little from talking about Western Australia or Australia and focus a little bit on the company's interests outside of Australia. Because it's true that the capability that we deploy here is largely derived from those activities around the world, where we operate a pretty diverse portfolio across 5 continents. So we undertake hard rock mining in Australia, obviously, and also in the US. There's extraction of lithium from brines in the South America and also in the US. And then, of course, there's the lithium processing here in Australia, China, South America, and the US. We have aspirations to expand into the EU and also further into the Asia-Pacific region. I think it can be said that Albemarle's energy storage business, the part of the business that runs the lithium enterprise, truly does range the globe. I'm going to touch on just for a moment, because someone asked me earlier about this, what else do you do other than energy storage or lithium? And so yes, we do have another global business unit. The company's made up of two real main global business units: energy storage, which is where we fit in, of course. But the other one's fascinating. I could talk for hours. I won't. Have a look at it on the website. It's called Specialty Products, and it operates extraction and manufacturing facility across parts of the globe like Germany and in Jordan, producing bromine and derivative products that are used in everything from flame retardants to, would you believe, beef and poultry food preservation and processing. So it's a truly specialised business and a really interesting one, but not one that we do an awful lot of here in Australia. As we stand today, we reflect on, it's great that we're the right company for right now, but that's just not enough. We can't rest on that. We have to maintain leading technology edge, because we're in an environment of absolutely continual evolution of battery technology and chemistries. The pace at which the industry is moving is frankly sometimes a little bit frightening, but others would say exciting and challenging. This means we need to develop a really strong R&D focus with the ability to advance the products we produce. We need to grow and evolve those products to meet customer needs and customer expectations. And that's going to be a key differentiator. And it's where we're leaning most into that chemical DNA that I spoke about earlier. The company is in the process of developing a technology park in Charlotte, in North Carolina, where our headquarters are, and it's going to undertake materials research there, advancing process development and accelerating bringing the next generation lithium products to market. New technologies that are being explored by Albemarle include solid-state batteries and the potential to really maybe open up mainstream applications in spaces that we probably can't even predict today. Think about it. Will next-gen batteries be capable of powering long-distance trucking, aviation, and even shipping into the future? Today, the lithium-ion batteries use lithium materials mainly in the cathodes and the liquid electrolytes. We're looking at a future that will include their use in anodes and solid electrolytes. Our work on anodes include lithium metals, which I've seen, and they're just incredible, and they are under 20 microns in size, which is apparently about half the size or half the thickness of a human hair. So lithium metals, really, really interesting technology and advance. Now, I'm reliably informed by our very enthusiastic R&D guys that the purpose of all of this is that it's going to make batteries more energy dense, as well as lighter, safer, and faster charging. And we have an internal view as well that these evolutions may actually need more lithium, not less. So you can see why it's such a contested conversation as to the role going forward of battery technologies and products like lithium. Let's also talk about recycling, because it's another critical area of focus for us as we go forward. We're looking at the current and the novel technologies to recycle lithium from the spent EV batteries. Our vision would see the development of a continuous loop, or a circular economy, if you like, where we have the capacity to convert the recycled lithium from the spent batteries back to being a battery-grade lithium. Our recently announced partnership with Ford includes a collaboration with them on how we might go about putting together a closed-loop recycling system concept, which is really exciting to be able to work with a partner who would actually take that technology and put it to market. It may seem a stretch, but we have scenarios where recycling actually becomes, eventually, the dominant source for lithium going forward. As the economics of mining may dwindle and the demand for sustainability drives greater innovation, I knew there'd come a point where it would get too much, greater innovation, recycling will be the way we produce the majority of the lithium going forward. And Speaking of sustainability, it is something that is important to touch on because it's not only dear to our customers' hearts, it's something where Western Australia and Australia can, I think, rightly be very proud of what it's achieved and what it represents in terms of being an ESG, a positive ESG environment for product supply. Albemarle was a very early adopter of a standard known as IRMA, the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. And this year, the company was actually the first lithium producer globally to complete an independent audit for our site in the Salar de Atacama in Chile, where we reached an audit standard of IRMA 50. This incredible photo, as you can probably tell, is taken from our site in Chile. If you're interested in having a look at the audit document, the entire document is now transparently published on the IRMA website, and you can find it today. So the Greenbushes and the Wodgina mines have also both commenced an IRMA audit process, and our Kemerton processing or manufacturing facility will shortly commence the RMI initiative, the Responsible Mining Initiative. These independent audits, along with efforts to map traceability, will ensure that Australian lithium is a premium product which our key customers can rely on to meet consumer expectations around sustainable and ethical sourcing. I'll be honest and say to you, and if anyone in the room is dealing with the IRMA standards, they will know, IRMA is not for the faint-hearted. There are about 200 potential criteria that can be accessible under IRMA. But we've made the deliberate choice to go with IRMA because we wanted to set the standard high, both because we see it as a differentiator and also as we look to the future because we believe it is future protection as consumer sentiment around ethical sourcing increases. All right, I reckon that's about enough for today. What do you reckon? I've been told up to 40 minutes, and I went, no way, I can't sustain 40 minutes. Let me close by saying the Great State book that I talked about earlier said back in 1972 that WA was the luckiest state. That has, I think, been absolutely true through iron ore booms, gold rushes, and the oil and gas bonanzas that some of us have been a part of. Right now, I think it's true because the world is looking to us here in Western Australia to provide the sustainable, secure lithium products that will fuel the clean energy transition and help combat climate change. How fortuitous then for us at Albemarle, with its deep chemical and technology DNA, that we were able to identify early the state's incredible quality lithium resources, and we also saw WA as a place to invest early in downstream manufacturing. Some might say that we got it lucky. I like to say right company, right time, right place. And I feel very lucky indeed to be part of what is a truly extraordinary moment in our industry. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you very much, Beverley. You can stay at the lectern if you like.
Yep.
A few questions that have come through on the Slido app. If you want to throw any last-minute questions in there, the QR code on the screen there will take you there straight away. So get your questions in quickly. A few questions. There was one about batteries when they reach end of life, but I think you've probably covered that in as much detail as you'd like. All right. Someone asked, what does your Kemerton expansion mean for jobs in WA, and where will you be sourcing your workers?
Ooh, yeah, great question. If anyone wants to talk battery technology and chemistries, there's this bloke called James Shea at Table 7, okay? He's the guy. Yeah, I know a little bit, but after a year there's a lot to learn. Jobs, yeah, it's a fantastic question, and I think it's a question that's on all of our minds, isn't it? As I said, we will need 800 ongoing permanent employees to operate a 4-train processing site at Kemerton. We really want the majority of that workforce to live locally. We want them to be southwest based, with their families, with their friends, with their networks, and living in and contributing to that community. So we're doing all we can to make that a reality. I will say there are some challenges. Finding a house in the southwest at the moment to rent or buy is pretty tough. So we're looking at how can we have a long-term housing strategy that will allow us to do the best we can to have the majority of that workforce locally. I think everyone understands the productivity and community fabric benefits of that local workforce. We have incredibly high local workforce at the moment with the 2 trains. We have about 450 or so staff there at the moment, of which nearly 90+% of them live locally. Where are we going to get our construction workforce from? We'll need about 1,000+ people to help build Train 3 and Trains 4, which are officially underway as we speak. We absolutely expect that some of that workforce will be drive in, drive out, fly in, fly out. It's just the reality. There are not enough construction workers in the southwest, and we're not even sure there will be enough in Western Australia available to work right here, right now at Kemerton. So yes, it will be a FIFO-DIDO arrangement, and we are recruiting madly. We are promoting and advertising everywhere. So of course, if you know anyone who's not busy working at the moment, send them our way.
Bev, you'll be absolutely shocked to hear that the most endorsed question on the list is something we haven't really talked about yet. What was the biggest determining factor in pulling the Liontown bid? Time to address the elephant in the room, I guess you could say.
Do you know, as I think I've sketched out, Albemarle is absolutely a global business, and it sees Australia, but really Western Australia, as totally critical to our strategic growth in energy storage. However, remember that the board has to sit there and make a global decision about how it wants to invest going forward and what are the right investments at the right moment in time for the company. So look, a big and complex decision for the board to make. I think the board noted, or certainly our CEO noted, we had a fantastic opportunity to work really collaboratively and constructively with the team at Liontown. They are a first-rate group of people, and we really enjoyed and appreciated the privilege of working with them on DD for those 5 or 6 weeks or so. However, a global decision looking across at all the things that we want to invest in as a company in all different parts of the world means that at this moment in time, the answer was the complexity was significant and it was time for us to make a call and move on, which is how it played out.
Okay. Bat and pad nice and close together there, Bev. Solid defence. All right, I think we have time for one more. This is more of a personal question, and then a few people have sort of touched on this generally. Just wanting to know about your journey from journalism to mining. What advice would you give perhaps to the WA Mining Club scholarship students in the room, or perhaps young people thinking about entering the industry? What would your advice be?
The resources sector. Take every opportunity you can to learn, even when you don't know what you will use that learning for. Learn how to write, learn how to communicate. Communication seems to me the most valuable tool in anyone's armoury, to be honest, as I see the complexity of business, but also the complexity of how we work together as humans, globally, across teams, via lots of media platforms. The ability to communicate, to get your message across, and to articulate and advocate your case is kind of critical. So I am quite glad that I started out as a pretty ordinary journalist, because it's turned out to be really helpful. The other thing I would say is find people you can learn from and be upfront with them. I want to learn from you. I want to hang out with you and find out what you know and use that as a learning, and embrace that. And for all of us in the room, I think here's the opportunity. Be the person that someone wants to learn from. What more of an honour would it be for us as we hit these, some of us, slightly latter stages of our career, than to have someone learn something from us? I mean, heck, some of those pretty painful days have to have been for something, right? If it can help someone learn going forward, why not? So that's probably off the top of my head where I'd go, Tim.
Very good.
And don't be a journalist. Terrible career.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I think that ship might have sailed for me, I'm afraid, Beverley, but thanks for making me question all the big decisions I've made in my life. Thank you very much. And with that, thank you very much. I'm going to invite Nat Taylor back up.